Hello, and welcome to the June 12th, 2018 edition of the Cluster Lifecycle Special Interest Group meeting on the Kubernetes community. Let's see, let's pull up today's agenda. Rob, are you here to talk about the Cluster API alpha status? Crickets. If not, we'll push that down the agenda and come back to it. I'll see if he's around. Tim, do you want to take the next one?
So this is just a PSA because we're kind of in the end of the cycle for 111, and we're a little bit in debug firefighting mode because a lot of people are trying to debug and validate and verify and just basically do testing. But just a PSA reminder that Slack is essentially ephemeral, and writing up good issues is probably a better way to communicate ideas, to make sure that we have valid reproducers and to document those issues, because sometimes we might think we have a fix and we may not, right? And having that logged over time is important. So I think just ensure a good process going forwards because it helps everybody. And I know it's hard because everybody's trying to do their level best, which is reasonable, but let's just try and focus on the issues and log them and then rally on those if we can going forwards. So that's first PSA. I'll punt off to Jason and Lucas about the next thing.
Yeah, so yesterday when I was doing just this kind of firefighting bug fixing, I noticed a couple of etcd problems and warnings in the logs and so on and so forth. So Jason, myself, and Chuck have been working on those, and some others as well. So do you want to summarize, Jason, the fix that you came up with in the end here after we had done some slacking?
Yeah, so there were a few different issues that we uncovered. The first one was that we were not actually properly securing the peer port for etcd. We configured the client auth, but because and we assigned certificates to it, but because we didn't set the actual listen URLs for the peers to HTTPS, it basically was discarding the TLS configuration that we had in place. So it basically was essentially an unsecured peer port. So the first PR linked in the notes, 64988, addresses that issue, and it also increases the timeout for etcd, because there was also another issue where during the upgrade between the manifest, picking up the new manifest, and also the etcd 3.1 to 3.2 data store upgrade, it was taking longer than the default 1 minute that we were having for the upgrade. So I increased the timeout to 5 minutes, which is sufficiently long enough that there should be nobody that hits that timeout. I do want to follow it up with providing a note like Lubermir suggested, but that hasn't been done yet. The other fix in that first PR was also for updating the SANs that we assigned for the peer port as well, because it wasn't including localhost by default. So just to be able to bootstrap the cluster for a single node without any overrides, we don't really want to expose that port out beyond localhost, so just use localhost for that.
Yeah, but that makes it still easier to do AJ later on using the default. Yeah, so as Jason said, 3 issues. I hope we have at least 2 of them fixed now. Using HTTPS, so the default was HTTP, and I would hope etcd in the future would be as smart as if you set the peer cert flags, it would default to HTTPS instead of just you have to set both in order for it to be valid. But that is not the state now, so we have to set both, which is done at master. The PR just merged. And increasing the timeout will also hopefully fix our upgrade tests that are currently failing. Ruben had some other ideas that we might want to look into with regards to the upgrade test failing. Also, I also sent a PR yesterday with a misconfig in test infra. The only thing we have left, the third etcd issue, was about the client and server auths. Do you want to speak to that as well, Jason?
Yeah, I can. So after we updated to etcd 3.2, we were noticing a warning in the TLS, in the etcd logs, talking about TLS handshake issue. After debugging for a while, it didn't actually appear to affect any usability within Kubernetes. Kubeadm init was able to come up and everything was functioning. After digging in for a while, I figured out that it's the gRPC gateway that was introduced by default in etcd 3.2. It's attempting to use the server certificate as a client certificate to connect back. So I have a PR out there, 65020, and that one addresses updating the generation of the server certificate so that it has both server and client usages similar to the peer certificate, and that resolves the gRPC issue. Now, one thing to note about that is that during upgrade, we don't currently remint certificates. So we may want to figure out, either document in the troubleshooting guide, how to resolve that issue, or introduce a way to automatically regenerate those certificates. But that's a much larger discussion than I wanted to introduce in just a quick fix PR.
Yeah.
Can we file a bug upstream against etcd? It sounds like they are sort of misusing that cert, or it's at least misnamed. I know that internally Google, when I've talked to our security folks about certificates, they've said that it's better not to use the same cert for server and client. And it sounds like that's what etcd is doing here.
Yeah, there's an existing issue out there. I don't know the awareness of it, but I'll go ahead and I'll dig that up and I'll add that to the meeting notes as well. I also don't like the idea, like the peer certificates drive me crazy as well. There should be dedicated certs for each usage, I think.
Yeah, it would be nice to have those issues sort of bubbled up upstream to the etcd folks, so it's at least on their radar that it's something we care about. Yeah,
I also think we could open an issue for better auto detection. If you specify PS certs, the default pair arguments should be HTTPS by default, instead of just with a silent warning, or like kind of silent, just a warning in the logs saying that, oh, we won't use your PS certs because you didn't set both. I think that is a fair enough thing to implement for future releases at least.
So to step back then, should we be making that change, or should we make the change now, put a / to do in the cert that we're creating now with 111 and cross-reference the issue that we file against etcd?
I like the latter idea, because if we don't, we will not have a functional gRPC gateway for the etcd that we deploy. That really shouldn't affect Kubernetes, but it could affect the way that people are interacting and monitoring with the etcd deployment.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. I think that this is the right way to fix it in the short term, but we should work with the etcd folks, as Jason said, not just for this certificate, but maybe for all certificates, to figure out if there's a way to split the peer certs into actual client and server certs to separate those roles better.
Yeah, right. I mean, we can't really, if this is the way to do it, we have to, like, if we're deploying this version of etcd, we have to go, like, play by the rules, but then talk to them about making it better in the future.
It actually surprised
like
me that there were no config options exposed for configuring the gRPC gateway. It just automatically uses that certificate. There's really no toggles at all for it. So, yeah.
Okay. Cool. Another. So yeah, I think that's it regarding the etcd stuff. Really satisfied with the speed of this triaging. Like, generally, I mean, 24 hours ago we hadn't started with this, and now we already have like 2-3 PRs fixing stuff. So just a huge Huge thanks to everyone involved. Then we have other outstanding bug fixes. Yeah, Tim had already linked the PR there.
Yeah, so I know everybody's like debugging right now, and there's a lot of noise in Slack about all the issues that are going on. So I wanted to see if other folks if they're aware of any other bug fixes besides the SCD one and the blanket PR that Lucas put up for a bunch of minor bug fixes.
So what I didn't have time to include there was there's one or two small things with regards to dry run. So what I really want to do in our docs is to highlight the dry run mode more, because a lot of people are like afraid of what is Kubeadm init or upgrade going to do, and dry run like spits out everything Kubeadm would do, and you can also use that for your reference, like you're building your own cluster or doing the phases or whatever. You can just do dry run and see what are the manifests that would be generated. But I don't think we're doing that good job in our docs on actually highlighting that. So or making that more visible is something I want to do for 111 if at all possible, or right after. And there's I think one or two small fixes to make dry run work. There's something in the DNS stuff.
Could you log an issue against
yeah.
that, so we have posterity for it?
Yeah, I'm gonna do that. Other than that, so with regards to upgrading the kubelet config locally on the node, the current implementation just like writes the file down. Do you think we want to checkpoint the earlier file?
We already have a release note against this. If people are modifying the existing unit file that's there, that's kind of you shouldn't be doing that anyways. There's ways to expand it. So I'm okay with the release note with the current update, because you're not going to be able to affect it unless you put in a pre-rule on upgrade inside of your spec file and your Debian. So you could do that as part of your packaging updates.
So I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about the version kubelet configuration. So after you've upgraded your cluster to, let's say, 112, you want to get that. Then the kubelet configuration for 112 is in a config map, and you want to download that to every node. And when you run that command that downloads the thing, it's just going to overwrite the 111 config that is there. Do you want to like somehow
I think as long as if the config map is stored inside of the API server still, I would think as long as we have the version config map for 111 and the 112 version config map, I'm totally fine with just leaving it on the API server, because you always have posterity there.
Yeah, true. If the 112 thing is bad, you can just run the same command against 111.
Yeah, and you already have that command to pull down the config from the API server.
Yeah. Cool. Then that's one other with regards to our basal debs that I got a ping on yesterday. So not Kubeadm, but our debs, something with CNI.
It was the directory creation, and I commented on that individual issue, and I was surprised because I'm not a Debian expert for Debian packaging, but I do have lots of history with RPM packaging, and usually your specs can maintain and control your directory structures and blast them out at will. So typically that should be defined inside the packaging rule and not shelled out as a separate script to create it. So I think he closed the issue and he talked with XD about doing some other thing. I think the reason he closed the issue was because of XD's comment, not mine.
Okay, so there's some basal stuff. Yeah, Jeff just said you should use some other basal tools rule or something. Yeah. Okay, well, we should really check that, because as Ruben pointed out just like an hour ago or something, there's some kind of weirdness when installing the Kubernetes CN IDAB in our EDE tests, upgrade tests.
If we can log issues for all this stuff, that'd be helpful. I mean, even Robbie, are you taking notes? If you can assign action items for people to file issues on these things, I think that would be helpful too. You can poke me and I'll wrangle the cats.
So yeah, that's the most of the bug fixes, I think. For sure, there's some others as well, but should be the most of the stuff we know about right now.
Right. I think the next step on the list is basically about the docs.
So Tim, are you asking who has a status on docs, or are you just asking in general?
Going on currently.
Well, I can speak about that we are okay in terms of the features and the new commands we have. So that's like okay for the code freeze. We don't have anything else. Like the remaining stuff is like refactoring of some of the pages that overlap in so many ways. And I mean, I was speaking with Jennifer about this. We should possibly like extend this in the following weeks. I don't think we can fix everything for today, because today is a docs freeze.
Do we have the config, or Lucas, do you have the updated config documentation?
I have something like staged locally about like a draft of this is how you do the new, this is how the new kubelet Kubeadm integration works. And here is like the new schema, but I have to consolidate that what's a master in our docs. One thing I noticed was, I'll just take a look at the latest. Things merge so quickly, so just gonna revisit what's at head in the doc repo and try to put things up there that are net new docs. In terms of what we already have and like updating our current, as Lubomir said, I think we are in a pretty good shape, at least better shape than we've been some earlier releases. So that is really good.
I have one question about the kubelet configuration changes. Do you know like where should we put it in terms of the website? I don't know the location for it.
Not the main installation guide. Or point. You can link out from the main installation guide. I'm fine with that, but not the main installation guide.
No. Yeah, so if we could move it should be somewhere under a Kubeadm reference folder, but the exact URL I don't have. But a doc under Kubeadm reference.
And we should link to it. Basically, it has to be a separate page, and we have to link to it.
Yeah, separate page, and then we link stuff.
Well, you can submit, I guess, Google Docs links for me, because I know you're using Google Docs for editing. You can share the link, or maybe Jennifer can join too in terms of like copy editing before we submit the PR, or if you prefer, we can send this as a PR and Jennifer can then do that.
If I remember well now, can you hear me?
It's a bit wacky connection, but try. I guess it's Fabricio. I think he got disconnected. Yeah, I'll sync with you, Lubomir and Jennifer, if I need Kubeadm. Thanks.
So in terms of the other user stories, you created an issue for. Basically, you created a list of user stories. What else do we have to add for 1.11 that is crucial?
Let me pull it up. So I have. We have running EDO tests against Kubeadm clusters. That is done. I'm doing the packaging Kubeadm and like doing kubelets. I think we can punt the securing your Kubeadm cluster further. That is already there, but it's in the general like monoliths Kubeadm reference guide. So splitting that out to another doc can come during the next cycle. That is not critical.
So the one I started writing about the control plane arguments for Kubeadm. I mean, I've added only like 3 sections in there. I'm not sure what else to add to it, and because yeah.
So this dovetails with what I talked with Jason about, and Liz. Liz is out, but she had more experience on this space. But we changed the config so much that we definitely need a troubleshooting guide to help people walk through how you change there were macro arguments that used to be in the config that now need to go into extra args. So I think walking through the translation of what the previous config knobs did and how to pass them in is going to be pretty important, because I guarantee you that the people who relied on some of those things are going to start to file issues.
Yeah, and just to note, we have automatic conversions, and we have the Kubeadm config migrate command that can translate it for you client side. But yeah, definitely that is the thing I'm trying to write, but it's taking time, and I got interrupted by some of the etcd stuff yesterday. Yeah.
So one question here is, should we like explain the current config in terms of the extra arguments for the API server, and say that this is going to change automatically if you do an upgrade? I'm not sure.
I don't see how all the args are going to translate. Did you do an upgrade conversion for all the args that existed, Lucas? I didn't think they all worked.
So how do you mean? Yeah, so for all the config changes that I've done, there are upgrades. They convert automatically, but I've only done like compatible ones so far. I started with the easiest ones. But yeah, okay. We can take that via GitHub, I guess.
Yeah. Then again, the question is, should we add this as soon as possible, or are there priorities in terms of the user stories?
I think that configuring your control plane is a really important one. Yes. So if you can write up like this is how you, like common scenarios, like this is how you do the APIs of args, this is how you do this and this and this, using the like concrete examples of the config file, and saying that, for example, API server extra args is gonna change because eventually someday we're gonna have component config which is structured. This is just a string flag map.
Yeah, what I can work with you, Lubomir, on that, and Jason, I can take this off your backlog. Why don't we do that?
Yeah, basically my problem is that I really don't have user stories, like scenarios. I can explain what we have in terms of the configuration flags, but I really don't have stories.
Let me write it down concretely. I think
I think Tim had a list.
We have 2 separate issues, and I'll go through it and I'll write down the concrete. scenario.
You can just edit this page if you want. That is the work in progress one I shared.
Okay. Just send me a link in Slack.
The link's in chat, and I also stuck it in the meeting notes doc.
Cool. Now we have state of upgrade tests. So, Ruben, did you find something with regards to the Debian packaging that was not?
Yeah, sorry, I've been digging into that, and right now my main obstacle is that I'm not super familiar with the testing framework and how things are set up. So I'm trying to try to figure how that part works before I keep digging into the logs and find out what it is. I see something weird going on, but I first need to see how things are actually happening on the test side. So once that's, once I have more familiarity with that area, I'll be able to provide more useful information.
Okay. Yeah, I can link here one PR that I sent yesterday. That was a pure test infra bug fix with regards to the upgrade test. There, and that's it up. But in general, I hope there it is. In general, I hope that upgrade tests will be greener with Jason's latest patch. That should unblock the etcd upgrade. I'm gonna check manually on my machine if I can get an existing upgrade, and if I can't, or if I can, there's probably something wrong with the packaging or setup in test infra. But yesterday it was broken for real, as I couldn't get it working locally either. And that PR is now, so now the test infra technically should be working. We'll talk to YXDI or Jeff Grafton about the Debian Kubernetes CNI stuff. Yeah, I think we're in a better shape than we were yesterday, at least. Anything else that needs to be said? Or can we allocate some time for the cluster API soon?
I moved Dims's thing next because it's kind of overlapped with what we're talking about, which is, are we ready for the release candidate count, which is scheduled to be in 8 days?
I think so.
It's just a query from the point of view of SIG release. What do we think is going to cause us to move the date, right? That's the kind of thing that we need to look at. Is there anything that it doesn't seem like from the conversation so far, there is anything that's going to block us. But then is there something that is likely to block us? And if so, how long would be the next question? Or whether can we get through the release by documenting stuff, and then when the release is cut, then we can follow up with the point release. So that's the other option that we usually have.
I think the biggest unknown factor is the upgrade tests. Once we verify the upgrade tests are okay, I think we should be okay. I mean, everybody's currently in debug mode. We're kind of firefighting at this point. But I think we have a good beat on most everything that's happening.
Right. That's why I was commenting on the VIP that was there for collecting all the bugs. So we need to get them all in before we can look at the upgrade tests or any other tests to make sure that they are green, right? So
I think by the end of the day, all those things should be merged. So by tomorrow, we should have a better idea of the signal for the upgrade test.
Okay. So today is the day, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, like, now getting the etcd fix in that would just merged was really critical, because otherwise, if we hadn't noticed that in time, we would have had a problem. But with that in mind, and Jason saying he had a successful upgrade, and with me and others that are gonna verify from latest master now, I think we should have we have a way better signal. So that was the crucial part, and we hope we have that under control now.
Right. I don't remember seeing a issue for the upgrade test failures that is in the main Kubernetes repository. Is there something that you need to surface from the Kubeadm repository to the main repository so we can take a look at it? Or
oh yeah, true. I'll open the issue for like we often have an issue in Kubernetes that is like a Kubeadm team and release team issue, so we can coordinate like okay, we have 5 open issues in the Kubeadm repo. How critical are they? Can we move out? Or do they need to get fixes like this today or whatever? I'll open that issue today. So
yes.
We have one centralized point of communication between the release team and the Kubeadm team, other than Slack, that is, as Tim said, ephemeral.
Yes, thanks a lot. Josh is away on DockerCon, so I thought I'll just ask the same question that he would. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, next, Rob, do you want to talk about the cluster API alpha status?
Yeah, so for those that are interested in the cluster API, we've created an issue which kind of sets the standard for which we will consider alpha complete. And so I encourage anyone to like take a look at that if you have interest, or give any feedback. I don't know if anyone's taken a look at it, wants to have any comment right now, but yeah, that's kind of the place to set the standards for what is in or what is out of the release. And I think the link for it is in the doc.
Do you have a time frame for when you want to hit alpha? Is it going to be asynchronous from release or in line with release?
I think like time frame wise, what makes sense is July. I don't think we could hit all the all of the criteria in June, and I'm not thinking that we're associating with any specific release. I don't know if Robbie has any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, right now we are asynchronous with Kubernetes releases. There is an outstanding issue about how we want to cut builds and so forth that Chris Nova brought up on the Cluster API call last week about whether we want to be tied to the main Kubernetes release or not. I think there are pros and cons. Obviously, Kubeadm currently is tied to the main release, which has the upside of sort of giving you the forcing function of getting sort of everything buttoned up for release and being able to be sort of blocking for Kubernetes releases. It also has the downside of being tied to the Kubernetes release. And I know that COPS is divorced from the Kubernetes release, and that gives them more flexibility. And so we're trying to look at sort of the different models of what we can do, and talking to other folks in the community about what their plans are. So Phil Wittrock, who is working a lot on client tooling, has some interesting thoughts about potentially breaking some of the Kubernetes client tooling away from the main release as well. So we certainly don't want to sort of skate where the puck is today. We want to skate to where the puck is going and think about sort of how it fits in with the other tools in the ecosystem and what their release cadence and cycle is going to be like. So there's an open issue for that. I can link that here if people are interested in putting in down thoughts or opinions on what they think a good release cadence or release cycle would be.
Okay, so I think that's all I had on that bullet point, or that agenda item, unless somebody else had any comments.
How close are we to be able to move our Kubeadm EDE testing to cluster API clusters?
That is a good question. We've been trying to figure out A, how to get to alpha, and then B, how to start putting EDE tests on top of the cluster API. We've been reluctant to put tests on top of it until it's at least somewhat stable. So I think if you look at the issue Rob linked and we burn down those outstanding issues, we'll feel like we have at least a more stable core that we can start looking at porting tests on top of. So that is something that is not on the very short-term roadmap, because we don't feel like we don't want to break people's end-to-end tests as we mutate things in sort of the alpha phase when the intent is to break things on our side. We want things to be a little more stable before it's the foundation for other people's stuff, where if we make a breaking change, that we have a rippling effect. And there's a lot of overhead to going and fixing all of those ripple effects at this phase of the project. So, Rob was saying like, maybe July we'll have alpha. If that's the case, then we'd look at starting to figure out how to rebase some end-to-end tests right after that.
We would happily be the first consumers of a testing apparatus, just saying.
So honestly, like, anything you have now is probably better when we have what we have currently.
Don't say that.
Yes.
Lucas, don't say that. It's not that bad.
Yeah, I mean the upside of what we have currently is nobody's changing any of the Kubernetes Anywhere code, right? So that code and that code aren't breaking you as a side effect, right? So on the downside is it's really hard to understand what it does.
Yeah, so the normal EDU testing is pretty okay, as Dim said, but the upgrade testing is harder. And I think that when we want to port this on top of Kubernetes, the cluster API, we should really have some kind of detailed doc and ambition before even starting to code. So we can really spec out the details, and without having to go into like, there's some binary like test and kube test or whatever it's called, I don't remember anymore. But like that we don't have to build our stuff into Kubernetes just for getting EDU tests to run, because that is currently the case. That is another more general problem as well.
Yeah, I can help with that. But I had a question for Rob and Rob. And the question was, right now the alpha criteria seems to point one provider. Are we going to have more than one provider for beta that we're going to list as a criteria? Or what is your thought process? I mean, right now it's vSphere and GCP, right? And I don't know how frequent, how people are testing the vSphere one.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. There's been a lot of folks in the community that appear to be building other implementations. So on the Cluster API call, it sounds like both Red Hat and Heptio are working on AWS implementations. I don't know where the code for any of those are, and I think it would be great if we could sort of consolidate the code base for different providers and make that part of sort of the standard test suite. So I think that's a great thing we should probably bring up during the meeting tomorrow, is if that's not an alpha, so maybe it could be argued that should be an alpha exit criteria. Right now it's not on the list. If it's not, should it be a beta exit criteria? And if so, how do we have a path to get there, right?
Right. Again, we should do what we are doing for the cloud provider, where we should say that there has to be a dashboard and it has to be integrated and there should be conformance tests showing up there. The same stuff that we have for the cloud provider stuff.
Right. So assuming we put those infrastructure pieces in place, if people are willing to contribute implementations on different environments, then we can put those in the dashboard. If nobody contributes those implementations, do we say we aren't going to exit beta until we have those implementations, right? So I guess that is, I think, the question in my mind.
Yeah. I mean, how do you even know that the code repo that somebody's pointing to does the stuff that is required?
Yes, right? And I think that's where like the conformance tests fit in, right?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So you indirectly touched on something which I might want to bring up as an agenda item, which is like the cloud provider documentation and integration for this release cycle.
Are you talking to me or to Dims?
Yes.
I haven't looked at it yet, honestly. I know I'm supposed to, but yeah, I haven't been able to look at it. I have to kick the tires, before next week.
So I haven't attended the SIG cloud provider meetings for a while, formerly a work group cloud provider. But I like in general. Sorry, please.
You pinged me on at least 3 PRs where you changed some of the configuration options, and all of them look good. But I have to try it out. That's what I've been, you know.
You meant that, yeah. So I was just thinking more generally, like it's really good that the other 3 cloud providers are going beta now in 1.11. I haven't tried one out recently. I tried it like a year ago or something when we started prototyping, but not now after I've just been reviewing some of the docs they have. So currently we have 2 modes. We have like in tree, you can set, and then you do cloud provider, whatever, set that using API server xlogs and controller manager xlogs and in the kubelet xlogs. All these 3 exist in the Kubeadm config file. So it's now like possible to use for the first time to use the in-tree cloud provider directly via Kubeadm. So that is at least a good step forward in terms of usability. But we don't want to. I mean, we should definitely document that. Like, you can use these 3 string arg maps to like set the cloud provider flag to your components. But please check out the like outer 3 cloud providers that now have like the conformance tests and stuff uploaded, and run like more as kubectl apply and add on top of the cluster. And Chuck said the other day here that you need to specify a cloud provider external to a kubelet. And to do that, you basically have to give Kubeadm join a config file with kubelet xlogs setting cloud provider to external. And that is something we should like document as well. So this is the standard. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say you can use the internal tree cloud providers using an external, like using cloud provider external on just the kubelet, but you've got to like set the daemon set, the cloud. You've got to have the cloud controller manager running that like points to the in tree. Yeah.
So the documentation is slightly maddening, and by slightly it's very. So it's not very consistent, and there's some alpha features that are called out in pieces that are kind of disconcerting for things that we are recommending for folks to use. So do we know if there's a single owner? Like, do we have a single throat that we can choke to understand, who is the owner of this stuff? Because we're indirectly kind of touching all of this, and I'd like to be able to have a single owner that we can reference that will give us the canonical source of truth.
Yeah, as far as I know, it's Walter Fender. It's Chef Taco on GitHub. Lucas has his hand up, but as far as I know, he's the one driving from the Google side, and I think has taken over a lot of the driving from the folks that started the effort. Lucas, did you have something to say?
Yeah, so like SIG Cloud Provider has at least Jago McLeod or something, as well as Andrew Sue Kim from DigitalOcean as SIG leads. I think and then we have Siddhartha Mani as well. So these are 3 people you can ping in SIG Cloud Provider as they are leads if you want to get some clarity into stuff. But like, that's for the more generic questions. For every single cloud provider, there are a lot of differences. So then, like, if you want to know something,
it's fine if we point out to other documentation. It's just the overall internal documentation and consistency of story, and have the breadcrumbs for a user to understand. Because right now, like, if I were a user coming into the documentation, there's no way. You'd have to like beautiful mind that sucker together to understand what's actually going on and how you set it up properly.
I'll ask Andrew about the state of docs for beta. I would guess that when they're going beta now, they have a higher, like, the docs will be of higher quality as part of like the beta mark. So we could definitely do something there. But yes, as Chuck said, the recommended way to do stuff with existing cloud providers are to like run the initialize all your kubelets with cloud provider equals external. Pass that flag to the kubelet. Start up your Kubernetes cluster, and then deploy with kubectl apply, for example, the cloud controller manager. That is a binary that is released by Kubernetes, and there's an image, there's everything like the normal cloud, the normal controller manager, and this is like the stopgap, so you can kubectl apply this binary for the existing cloud providers, so just setting cloud provider equals AWS or whatever, and deploy that, and it will do its stuff and untaint the kubelets, initialize them, and similar. So that is like the idea. That you can do this new flow using the existing cloud providers. And when the existing cloud providers have broken out all the dependencies and all their stuff into a new repo, have a good release process, etc., 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 you can just switch the image like a rolling upgrade, like any controller, any operator in the cluster. You can just like do a rolling upgrade of the deployment, and now you have a fully functional out of 3 cloud provider. So that is the like migration plan. Either you go in tree, set the cloud provider flag in every place, and similar, or you go out of tree, set cloud provider external on all the kubelets, and run the cloud controller manager or your specific binary. Like DigitalOcean has something. Run your binary on top of the cluster. That is the like short version, but I don't have the like last week's context of the exact state of if this is working. But if somebody like wants to like have a use case for our Kubeadm docs, like just summarizes this piece of information, there are 2 ways. Either you do this, or then you do this. And here are the relevant out of 3 docs.
I would really just like to have the single point of like a pre-step to init, right? To like pre-step before you init, think about your cloud provider, link to this doc, right? So that would be a nice just like punt. We don't want to own the space. Punt to them, and then they can maintain the docs properly.
But I mean some like in the cross-cutting between the cloud provider and the Kubeadm stuff. This is how you, for example, this is how you configure an out of 3 cloud provider, especially for Kubeadm. I mean, that might be docs we're gonna own.
Well, I'd like to let the troubleshooting for the time being, because that makes more sense than trying to put it in the mainline docs and trying to own that over time.
Yeah, in the reference section of Kubeadm.
There was some specifics about AWS the other day.
There's a lot of specifics there.
So the question is, do we want to maintain this as a SIG? Because I mean, we should just explain the generic way how to set up a cloud provider, and then the specific possibly should be maintained by the cloud provider SIGs.
Yeah, we should do the general, but the problem is we get all the issues of people doing, like, I do Kubeadm init with my AWS cloud provider, and it doesn't work because I have another host name that AWS expects me to. That is like the second most common problem, like issue in Kubeadm. So we kind of get a lot of that, and collaborating with SIG cloud provider on doing at Stims at this kind of centralized place. Here are the cloud providers, here are the documentations, here are like the specifics of the AWS cloud provider, here are the specifics of the GCE cloud provider, and here are the docs for the DigitalOcean or OpenStack cloud provider. Would be wonderful, but I don't know if that is a thing yet. I don't think so. So before we end today, major themes. Somebody wrote there already, Kubeadm config. That is true. Kubeadm version 1, alpha 2.
To be clear, you're looking at major themes for the 1.11 release.
Yeah.
To put in the release.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
For our SIG for 1.11 release notes. myself and I guess Tim, if nobody else is want to do it. Tim, Robert may also want to put something there about the cluster API, maybe.
Probably
Justin,
not 111. We're divorced from the Kubernetes release cycle. I don't think it's worth mentioning there.
Okay. How about Justin? Anything like to know? I guess we would talk about COPS 110 then, but anyway, it might be worth adding something.
I'll take a look. Thank you.
Cool. I'll ping you on the docs. Yeah. So with regards to Kubeadm, version 1.0.2 configuration, new stuff there. Our Kubeadm now kind of controls the kubelet using structured component config. Lots of bug fixes, yes. Is there something else? I'm trying to.
We should probably mention one of those things that we automate stuff at Kubeadm init times for the kubelet, like the release. I forgot the name of it. So the SIG group driver and the resolve the issue we had.
I think that falls under lots of bug fixes.
It also falls underneath the kubelet configuration mechanism.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Both of those, but core DNS could be a good thing to note. That so kubelet security is another one actually. We could say kubelet configuration and security or something, because what we do now is like we have a breaking change in the sense that we disable the read-only port, for example, to be more secure, and stuff like that. Being the forerunner of like what the kubelet is gonna have as default. We have the new Kubeadm upgrade diff command, but maybe not a theme. It's more like specific feature.
Lucas, what about pre-pooling images?
Yeah.
Well, I think we should list all the new commands, to be honest.
That is, so all the new commands, there's going to be like multiple levels. We're going to have major teams, first major teams for all the SIGs. Then a lot of action required stuff with PRs and similar. And then after that, we have like individual SIGs, all the relevant, what you need to know about PRs. So like the PR that adds new commands will be listed there, that changes behavior, etc. So there's going to be multiple levels of granularity there. But new config file controlling the kubelet, core DNS default, lots of bug fixes and new CLI commands.
But Lucas, pre-pooling image from my point of view changes the Kubeadm init workflow, and it's something that should be highlighted because many people are using Kubeadm in air gap environment. So this is a sensitive topic for them.
Yeah, I mean it's better now, but yeah, we could like in general, like a major theme for that would be like making Kubeadm work better with other CRI runtimes and like and air-gapped environments maybe. Like that would be a major theme I could see, because it all like is towards that goal. Okay, I think the time's up. Robert?
Yes, I was just about to mention that it's now 10 o'clock. Thank you everyone for joining. We will see everyone again next week, right before RC1 gets cut.
Yeah.
Hey folks,
and
have a good one.
we have a Kubeadm office hours tomorrow as well, I think.
Yes.
As well as the cluster API.
Yep. Take care.
Bye.